The mistress brought misery to my husband. Jim was probably the most thoughtful person I have ever known. I don't think he ever forgot a single important event. He never left the toilet seat up, loved to buy flowers, and always said compliments. You really know how to wear a bikini, and you're as beautiful as the first day we met. He was careful with his language, always had a big smile, and knew how to make love. Yes, Jim was all of the above for the woman he loved. Unfortunately, Jim's favorite woman was his mistress, Stephanie Crowell. I, on the other hand, his wife Lisa Langley, was more of a servant who kept his house clean, cooked dinner, and ran his errands even though my workday was just as long as his. It wasn't always that way. In high school and college, I was the it girl that many people courted. When we got married, Jim considered himself lucky to have caught my eye. I don't think he considers that anymore. This begs the legitimate question. Why did I put up with it? The answer is complicated, but it basically boils down to my poor self-esteem, which is a result of the fact that I've put on a significant amount of weight since I married Jim when I was 21 and he was 22. At 21, I weighed 127 pounds, despite having large D-size breasts. At 25, I weighed 161, and it wasn't muscle or desirable curves. I was skinny. My excess weight was the result of the death of my sister and favorite cousin, the bankruptcy of the first company I worked for after college, and Jim's affair with Stephanie, which began when he found himself unable to provide me with emotional support after my sister's death and ran off to Stephanie while I gained weight. Due to the weight gain, the deaths of people close to me, and Jim's cheating, which he wasn't too secretive about, I became depressed. The only thing that made me happy was that my new job was challenging and financially rewarding, and it seemed to be the only thing that kept me sane. I don't know how long I would have continued like this if a chance encounter at a deli near my office one Thursday hadn't happened. I was grabbing my usual Reuben turkey sandwich when I literally ran into Phil Whitaker. Phil is a guy I knew in high school who we were friends with, though we never met one-on-one. I think he was too shy to ask me out. As I recall, some of the guys and teachers at school disliked him for being unashamed. He only said what he really felt and didn't sugarcoat the situation. This was never a problem for me. Phil is good-looking, and as I recall, in his senior year of high school, he was considered the most likely candidate for a successful career in business. "Hi, Lisa," he said, looking at me for a few seconds. He didn't immediately recognize me by my weight gain and hangdog look. In high school, I had always been smiling and perky like, that girl. "Hey, Phil," I said with a forced smile. "I thought you moved away." "I moved back about 6 months ago because a good business opportunity came up. Do you mind if I have lunch with you when our orders are ready?" "No, I'd love to," I replied, this time smiling unforcedly. While Phil ate his roast beef sandwich and I ate my turkey Reuben, we played catch-up for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then, after a pregnant pause, Phil looked into my soul and asked, "Why are you depressed and what can I do to help?" I grinned forcedly and replied, "I guess you haven't changed since high school as far as your candor is concerned." "Of course I haven't changed. I look just like me," he objected. "It's a long story, and I have to get back to work," I muttered, trying to avoid an unpleasant conversation. "Well, since I'm divorced and have nothing to do tonight, why don't we get together and talk about it? It won't take more than 3 hours, will it?" "Are you serious?" I inquired. "Like a heart attack," he replied. "There's no way you look like a hanging dog and 30 pounds overweight unless there's a serious problem and I care enough to want to help." Like I said, he was never stingy with words. I knew Jim would probably be with his cheating girlfriend Stephanie, so I said to myself, why not? To Phil, I said, "Where would you like to meet?" "At one of the Planet Fitness franchises I own. We can make it the one closest to your house. Where do you live?" "I live in the nearest northern suburb on Delaney Street." "Great. You're probably no further than 2 miles from my place on Borden Parkway. Here's a card with your address and phone number. he said, rummaging through a stack of cards in his inside jacket pocket and pulling out one with the address of Planet Fitness, which was indeed only a mile from my house. "I'll see you there today at 6:30, he said. Then without further ado, he stood up, squeezed my right hand, and left. As expected, late that evening I received a typically cryptic text from Jim saying that he had to work late, i.e., have sex with Stephanie, so nothing would stop me from meeting Phil. I arrived at Planet Fitness on Borden Parkway around 6:20 and walked up to the front desk where a well-dressed young woman was sitting behind a desk. "Hi," I said. "My name is Lisa Langley. I'm here to meet Phil Whitaker." "Oh, hi, Lisa," she smiled. "I'm Amanda." Phil called and said he'd be a few minutes late, but to make me feel at home. "Oh, nice," I smiled. "So how do you know Phil?" she asked. "We went to high school together," I replied. "He was the smartest and most charming guy in school, like now?" She grinned. "Pretty much the same," I replied. "Phil owns the place?" "Sure, he owns 2 other establishments downtown and in the south suburbs, as well as a few other businesses, I'm told. He's probably the most successful 28-year-old guy in the whole neighborhood," Amanda replied. "And how is he as a boss?" "He's great, pays above market, treats everyone well, makes sure employee morale is at an all-time high, but," she chuckled, "if you screw up, he'll tell you to your face, give you one chance to improve, and then fire you. I like guys like that, determined and no nonsense." Amanda seemed to be charmed by Phil. And why wouldn't she be? He was a good-looking, successful guy. Amanda and I chatted for another 5 minutes. She greeted about 6 or 7 of the regulars who came in during that time, briefly interrupting our conversation, and then Phil walked in. When he walked in, wide smiles appeared on the faces of Amanda and the other 2 female employees, who I guessed were trainers. He greeted all 3 with his smile and called them by their full names, then greeted me. "Sorry I'm late," he said, about to give me an explanation. "No explanation needed," I cut him off. "Okay, then let's go to my office," he replied. He turned to Amanda and said, "Amanda, please don't let anyone interrupt us unless it's an emergency." "Understood, Phil," she replied. I got the feeling that Amanda didn't think I was a threat because of my 30-plus pounds of weight, so she smiled at me. We walked to Phil's office, with glass walls so anyone could look in. I guess he wanted the staff to know he didn't have any illegal meetings. Handing me a bottle of Perrier and making sure I was comfortably seated, Phil got right down to business. "Okay, Lisa, come on." For some reason, perhaps because I knew I could trust Phil and hadn't been able to unload for months, my whole sad story spilled out. After only 45 minutes, I had my whole pathetic story out and was quietly crying. He handed me a box of facial tissues. When I was done, he said, "I'm not a psychologist, but I know what you need. You need exercise. The endorphins produced by exercise will bring you out of your malaise or depression, whatever it is, within a month. Once you're back to your normal weight, with more muscle, you'll be able to make a rational decision about what to do." "You, really, think that?" I stammered. "I think so. And away with your cheating husband. You make your own appointments for your workouts without regard for him. Besides, I suggest you make inquiries on him to find out what you need for a divorce on the best terms, and I suggest you separate your finances from his immediately," Phil bellowed. I don't know," started to answer me. Phil didn't like my silence. Ordering me to sit down, he picked up his phone and called. "Hi, Bert. Sorry to bother you at home, but I need you to help my friend. When can you meet her, tomorrow or Saturday?" I was a little shocked. After listening for a while, Phil turned to me and said, "Bert is a financial genius and my money manager. He can see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock or Saturday morning. His office is about a mile from here. What would suit you?" Like an automaton, I replied, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon would be good." "Great." Phil smiled. Then, talking on the phone, he said, "Her name is Lisa Langley. She'll be there at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I'll tell her to bring all the financial information she can. Thank you, Bert. Pay me for her initial consultation." After Phil and Bert exchanged good-natured macho banter, ending with Phil saying, "I'll kick your ass at Saturday's hand-to-hand ball if you're brave enough to show up there," he cut the conversation short. Bert is a genius. He'll help you separate your finances from Jim's and invest your money wisely. The first consultation will be free, but after that, you'll have to negotiate his fee. Once he quotes you a price, tell him that if he doesn't give you a 50% discount, I will penalize him. Now let's talk about the private investigator. "I'm not sure," I started to say, but Phil was unstoppable. "Since I'm not going to charge you for the first 6 months of training, you'll have enough money to use the same private investigator I used to get information on the competitor and my cheating ex-wife. Now for the details." I seemed unable to object to his words. Apparently he was planning my life for me, as he talked about my fitness plan for the next 6 months and arranged to go with me to meet with the private investigator the following Monday, although I managed to delay the moment. I was to start my fitness class on Saturday and work out 5 days a week. He also gave me a sheet of dietary information designed to improve my fitness and beat depression. When we were done, he took me out to the gym and introduced me to Simone and Gretchen, the trainers who would be working with me. Simone looked like an African chief, 6 feet of steely muscle, and Gretchen looked like an 18th century Viking warrior princess, even taller and more muscular than Simone. I realized from their handshakes that they could crush me without batting an eye. As I left, I said, "Thanks, Phil, I think. Am I really going to survive?" "No, you'll thrive," he smiled. "I'll see you Saturday for your first practice." Normally, I don't let someone dictate my life to me. However, at that moment, my life was miserable, and I had confidence in Phil that he could get me back on track. So I decided to just go with the flow for 6 months and then reevaluate. Despite the hell I was going through with Jim, I felt I still loved him and wasn't sure about the divorce. But I decided to see what would happen next. Bert was very helpful and gave me a 50% discount, laughing when I told him what Phil had said. I met with a private investigator and she said she would have a report ready within 3 to 8 weeks. Those 2 things went off without a problem. The physical training didn't. Simone on Saturday and Gretchen on Sunday were sadistic brutes who probably would have been great torturers had they lived during the Inquisition, even if they had smiles on their faces and encouraging words, as they contorted my body during the 90 minutes of training both days. I probably would have burst into tears halfway through my workout on Sunday if Phil hadn't shown up, smiled at me, told me I was already looking better, and told Gretchen, "Keep it up." After my body had been bullied 5 times in the first week, something had changed. When I got home in the evening, I was so tired that after a quick dinner, whether Jim was there or not, I would fall into a deep sleep, much better than I had after my sister's death. After the second week, the workouts became less painful, and I was very encouraged when I saw that I had lost 8 pounds in just 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, I felt better than I had in a long time, and I was even more efficient at work than before. I also stopped dwelling on unhappy events in my life and began to believe that my depression would soon be a thing of the past. I still couldn't bring myself to meet with the private investigator to get her full report, because once I had ironclad proof of Jim's infidelity, I would have to make a decision. I begged Phil to give me a few more weeks, and he agreed as he seemed to be very pleased with my physical progress. I was pleased too, and over the next 4 weeks I lost another 14 pounds and felt more energetic than I had ever felt in my life. My weight was now 139 pounds, and according to Gretchen, within 5 to 6 weeks, I could be back to 130. The increased energy brought with it a problem as well. I was getting aroused by Phil. Fortunately, by adding yoga to my strength and conditioning sessions, I was able to get my thoughts under control. When I finally met with a private investigator, and Phil, at his insistence, for a report 2 months after starting my physical training, she told me some very interesting things. Her name is Samantha Price, but she insisted on being called Sam. "Okay, Sam, what have you got?" asked Phil and I at the same time. "Apparently your husband Jim never took Michael Bolton's 'When a Man Loves a Woman' to heart," she giggled, "because he's being pranked." "Say what?" I asked. "As you already know, your husband Jim is having a torrid affair with Stephanie Crowell, and I have the pictures and video to prove it. But what you don't know is that she's actually cheating on him, although she's doing it very cleverly, and Jim has no idea about it." "How so?" I continued my detailed interrogation. "Apparently, Jim is convinced that Stephanie loves him and will eventually agree to marry him. However, he doesn't want to give you up and divorce you until she's ready to do so, and she's distracting him by telling him that she's technically still married to a guy she calls Alan Crowell. That guy doesn't exist and she's not married, but she does have a loving and criminal relationship with a guy named Warren Bates. Stephanie got Jim to finance her phantom divorce proceedings with Alan Crowell and more, probably to the tune of $70,000. I was shocked. As far as I knew, he hadn't gotten that money from me, but maybe I was wrong. "Do you know where he got that money?" I asked. "From 2 sources. He cashed out his retirement account by paying a fine, and he got a second mortgage on your house. Here's a copy of the documents that prove it. I suspect your signature here is forged," Sam said, holding out a piece of paper to Phil and me. I probably would have cried when I saw my forged signature, supposedly notarized, but Phil's scolding threw me off balance. "That asshole," he growled. "What I told you is mostly the bad part," Sam said, "and here's the good part, and that's why I mentioned the Michael Bolton song. Like the song says, she's bad. But he can't see that, and he got really pissed off and blew off his good friend who warned him about Stephanie and asked him to check if she was playing with him." "What's this friend's name?" I inquired. "Will Lamson," Sam replied. I wondered why I hadn't heard or seen Will for the past couple months when he was often visiting and socializing with Jim. "Now her plan is to take him for another $50,000 or so while she and Bates work another bank scam. Then she and her buddy Warren Bates are going to leave," Sam continued. "How does she expect him to be able to get another $50,000? I asked. "Judging from the last tapes of their conversation, he's not too keen on agreeing to it, but I'm sure with some more quality sex, she can get him to fake a loan request from you or somehow tap into your savings and jewelry that you keep in the safe," Sam continued. "Luckily, Bert had already split our finances completely, so without outright fraud, which as the second mortgage showed, he wouldn't be able to pull that off, and I'd already moved everything in our safe deposit box into my own safe deposit box at another bank, which he obviously didn't know about." Sam then smiled broadly. "So, as the song says, to paraphrase, she's going to bring him so much misery as she plays him for a fool, and he'll be the last to know." "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. Phil replied, "Bring this information to Jim's attention. Tell him that if he doesn't rectify the situation immediately, you will arrest him and anyone who helped him forge the second mortgage for fraud. Then, depending on his reaction, you can proceed further." As she held out a business card to me, Sam interjected, "I like that idea. My Uncle Fred Morton is a detective in the fraud division of the police department, and I know I can ask him to help you if it comes to that." I wasn't quite sure if I was ready for a confrontation. I'd been avoiding it for almost 2 years. But then Phil said, "Let me take you to dinner, and we can talk about it." Phil did indeed take me out to dinner at a nice restaurant. He was a perfect gentleman except for one point. He ordered my food. I started to protest, but he said, "You're making such good progress that I don't want to see any backsliding. I'm making it my personal mission to get you to 130 within 6 weeks." The gleam in his eyes when he said that made me believe that Phil wasn't just helping me out of the goodness of his heart. Perhaps he had a love interest in me. I shuddered when I thought about it, but then put the thought out of my mind. During dinner and on the way to the car, Phil urged me to see Jim as soon as possible. He offered to be there for me, but I declined. I told him I needed a few days to recover, but I would do it. Friday night, when Jim was home, oddly enough, and we were finishing dinner, I told him, "We need to talk tomorrow morning." "I can't," he replied, stuffing his face with the last piece of pork chop. "I have to go somewhere from at least 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon." "Stephanie can wait," I growled, showing him for the first time that I knew his mistress's name. "You'll either meet me at this desk at 9 tomorrow morning, or, if you're not there, I'll call Detective Morton from the fraud squad." I don't think I've ever seen someone's face go completely colorless. He swallowed the last of his food, or he might choke on it. I could have talked to him that night, but I wanted him to have an unhappy dream or an attempt to sleep. "What? You're talking about?" he stuttered, unable to form a reasonable sentence. "Also, clear the table and put the dishes in the dishwasher. I had a hard workout this afternoon and I'm too tired. And finally, you'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight," I snickered. "You can't tell me what to do," he said as his courage seemed to return to him. "I just did, Mudak. And unless you want our conversation tomorrow to go off the rails, you're going to do as you're told," I snarled, looking him in the eye. I got a good night's sleep, but Jim apparently didn't, because the next morning when I sat down with him at the kitchen table, he had bags under his eyes. He'd cleared the dinner dishes off the table and put them in the dishwasher. "What's this about?" he asked nervously. "About your affair with Stephanie Crowell, how she and her buddy Warren Bates are playing you, and how you forged my signature on the second mortgage document and gave the money to that fool. That's what it's about," I growled. I then very deliberately and rudely laid out before him in order the pictures of his careless actions, the retirement account withdrawal statement, the picture of Stephanie and Bates kissing, and the second mortgage document with my forged signature. I then played him a snippet of a conversation Sam had recorded between Stephanie and Bates in which they talked about scamming him for another $50,000 and then leaving after they completed their bank scam. I thought Jim might pass out, but somehow he held on. After shifting his gaze from one document on the table to another, to the space and to me for 10 minutes, he finally spoke. "I don't know what to say." "No, I guess I don't." "What you do is call Detective Morton yourself," I said, flipping the Morton card Sam had given me over the documents on the desk. "Tell him the whole story and work with him to set up an operation to get the love of your life in jail. If you do that, you might be able to arrange to not be jailed for forging my signature, and if not, I'll press charges against you myself." "Stephanie is not the love of my life, but you, dear," he began. Unpleasantly for him, his lie was interrupted by my laughter. When I regained my composure, I said, "Do you really think I'm stupid enough to believe that, considering the way you've treated me for the past 2 years? I'm giving you until Monday at 5 p.m. to call Morton. After that, I'll call him, and you don't want that." I got up to leave for practice, but I couldn't help myself and said, "Hey, Siri, turn on When a Man Loves a Woman." As I was walking out the door with my gym bag, the song had the following line in it. "She can bring him such misery. If she thinks he's a fool, he'll be the last to know." I wondered if Jim had memorized those words. Jim had gotten lucky when he talked to the cops. Even though I'd told Jim he might get probation, I didn't really believe it. But it turned out that the other scam Crowell and Bates had pulled was very serious, so the cops were looking for them hard. Over the next 6 weeks, with Jim's help, the cops caught up with Crowell and Bates and, by raiding their apartment, were able to get evidence of a high-profile bank scam. So after pleading guilty to 1 count of second mortgage document fraud, Jim got 2 years probation for cooperating and agreeing to testify against Crowell and Bates. As I knew and had planned with the divorce attorney Phil set me up with, the guilty plea to fraud made my divorce from Jim a win-win. He didn't succeed in asset division, since apparently family law judges don't take too kindly to husbands who cheat on their wives during an affair. All of the money Jim got from the partition was used to pay off the fraudulent second mortgage, and the approximately $10,000 he was short of was able to cover by the prosecutor with the money seized from Crowell and Bates. I received virtually all of the proceeds from the sale of our house, minus the amount of the first mortgage, and along with the money I kept separate from Jim, my finances were fine, and I immediately rented a short-term apartment near downtown at Planet Fitness. Because I was so busy with work, my divorce, and my legal battle with Crowell and Bates, it took almost 2 months from my first dinner with Phil before I lost 130 pounds. But the extra time was worth it. During that time, my ego was constantly inflated by the stares I received during my 90-minute workouts and how often I was hit on while doing even mundane things like shopping or walking in the park. I began to be noticed by men, not only because I now had an even better body than I had at 21, but also because of the confidence I exuded and the ubiquitous smile on my face. The only downside was that Phil seemed annoyed by the increased attention I was getting, and the fact that he seemed reluctant to approach me romantically because of my newfound confidence. However, I had plans for him. When my quick divorce was almost finalized and I had been living in my new apartment for a week, wearing my most revealing workout clothes and drenched with sweat, I walked into Phil's office downtown at Planet Fitness, where I now worked out. His eyes had gotten as big as saucers. He was on the phone, but quickly pulled away from it. "I'm sorry to bother you, Phil," I said as soon as the receiver was down on the stand, "but I was hoping you could come to my apartment for a dinner party this Saturday night. You've been a great help to me, and I want you to know that I appreciate it." "Sure, Lisa, what time?" "How about 6:30? Here's my address," I continued, holding out a piece of paper to him. "What can I bring?" he asked. "Nothing but your appetites," I smiled as I walked out, wondering if he would understand the apostrophe after appetites. Phil seemed surprised that he was the only guest at the dinner party. He was even more surprised when he couldn't smell the odor of the food being prepared. I don't know whether it was surprise or lust on his face when he saw the revealing outfit I was wearing. After a lively greeting, I motioned for him to sit next to me on the couch in the living room. "When are the other guests coming?" he asked. "You are my only guest," I smiled. "However, before the evening begins, I need to talk to you about something." "Okay," he gingerly replied. "Why have you been so good to me for the past 7 months? Why did you help me completely turn my life around? Did you expect me to turn my depression into happiness?" These and other questions I asked quickly, without giving him a chance to answer. When Phil could only open and close his mouth like a beached fish without uttering a word, I picked up my high school yearbook from the coffee table and read the note he'd written in it his senior year. "To the best girl at Redmond High, good luck in the future. With love, Phil." Then I looked him in the eye and asked, "Is it because you had a crush on me in high school, but were shy about asking me out, and hoped that if you helped me, you'd get another chance?" He imitated a landed fish for a few more seconds before I put him out of his misery. "If that was your plan, Phil, it worked," I said as I stood up and took off my sundress, the only clothing other than my 4-inch heels, that I was wearing. He was still imitating a fish until I settled my body into his lap, which was hard to do given his condition, and kissed him gently on the lips. After about the 4th kiss, he seemed to come out of his trance. "Where's your bedroom?" he growled. "At the top of the stairs. First door on the left," I murmured, before sinking another kiss on his lips. With a strength no doubt fueled by adrenaline and testosterone, he climbed up with me in his arms and carried me up the stairs while I showered kisses on his face and neck. When he carried me to the bed, he threw me on it, and within seconds we were already making love. That weekend I had prepared many pleasures for Phil. Sunday morning was the most dramatic for me. I had never tried it before, but since I was now very fit and flexible, just like him, and I wanted to give him something unusual since he was so good to me, I gave him my surprise. "Phil, I want to be with you forever," I said. When we separated, he grinned as wide as the Mississippi River. Not only do I love you, but you're the most attractive woman in the world. It was the first time he actually said the L word. I smiled at him and said, I love you too, and judging by your performance, you're the most attractive guy in the world. Long story short, he stayed until Monday morning. We didn't eat fancy meals, but kept our strength up with an occasional snack, got some sleep, and showered regularly. We didn't have any serious conversations over the weekend, other than a brief I love you exchange. It seemed we were more interested in finding all of each other's hobbies than having a serious conversation. Okay, Lisa, spill it. What does this weekend mean? I smiled flirtatiously and replied, It means that since you're my savior, I'm yours, and you can do whatever you want with me. What if I just want to make love to you every weekend? Then that's what we'll do. Like I said, I'm yours, and you can do whatever you want with me. What if I want you to get pregnant? Then I'll stop giving you shots. What if I want you barefoot in the winter and pregnant in the summer? Then I'll save money on shoes, but I'll have to buy a lot of maternity clothes. What if I want to marry you? Then I guess I'd have to love and cherish you until death do us part. He stared at me for a good 2 minutes with an evil smirk on his face. Then he pinched one of my breasts and said, You know I've got my little finger around your little finger, don't you? With those words, he stood up with me in his arms. With one hand, he cleared everything off the kitchen table. Plates shattered, dishes clinked. He put me on the table and made love to me. That kitchen table sex happened 6 years ago. Phil and I have discovered that outside the bedroom, we are just as compatible outside the bedroom as we are in it. Tomorrow, we will take our 4-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter to the zoo for the first time, and Phil and I, extremely happy in our marriage, seem even more excited than the kids. I am very happy that the mistress who was the love of Jim's life, to paraphrase Michael Bolton, brought him such misery, played him for a fool, and he was the last to know, leaving me free to be with Phil. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.